Welcome. This is Stephen with Service Plus Solutions, and I'm here today with a conversation with David with Electrician Ed again. And on this topic, we have a 3-video series about dedicated circuits. And so I'm going to tell you dedicated circuits come into play when you have a specific electrical appliance that uses quite a bit of power. And there's a couple other reasons that may apply why you need a dedicated circuit. And so there's a question of, does this need a dedicated circuit? That's what we're going to dive into. Our 3-video series, this first video is going to be, what is a dedicated circuit? We're going to talk, what is it? Why is it important? And then as far as the code is concerned, which appliances are specifically called out to have a dedicated circuit. On the second video, we're going to go over, there's many other appliances that aren't specifically called out in the code that are going to need dedicated circuits. And there's a process to determine which one of those need it. So that's going to be in our second video. Our third video, we're going to go through a list of common appliances, and we're going to tell you, do they need dedicated circuits or not? I'll give you the punchline. Most of them, the answer is not yes or no. It depends. So there's more factors that come into play, and that's why we have electricians that were trained, and electricians can look into our code book and things that we're not sure about. But we can also assist you, not just in the safety aspect, which is what the code says, but also in the convenience aspect. We don't want you tripping breakers to have a nuisance or blowing fuses. We also don't want you to forget things as you plan maybe a kitchen remodel, the layout of your room and things like that. So all these factors go into play, and why we're, as electricians, we're here to assist you in the process. But these 3 videos on dedicated circuits will give you a good start, a good look into what all goes into play. So here we go as we Welcome. This is Stephen with Service Plus Solutions. I'm here again with David with Electrician Ed, and we are still on the topic of dedicated circuits. So this is going to be our 3rd video in the series. If you haven't checked out the other videos, our first video, what is a dedicated circuit and why is it important? And then which electrical loads are specifically called out by the code to have a dedicated circuit. So check that video out if you haven't. Second video, we went step by step on what additional, the process of determining, what additional electrical loads need to have a dedicated circuit. And that was pretty insightful. And then finally here on this video, we're just going to go on our list of examples here. We're going to go appliance by appliance and talk about, do those need a dedicated circuit or do they not? And so thanks again for joining me, David.
I failed to mention to you earlier too that there are some other rules that go along with the ones that we've talked about in the other videos, but they are specific to certain things. And I think we'll roll through those real quick, and then that'll give some better information for this list that we're going to give. Number 1, let me back up. The rules that we talked about were the 80% rule and the 50% rule, and those were for 15 and 20 amp branch circuits. The 80% rule was for if you have cord and plug connected equipment, one appliance cannot be more than 80% of the entire branch circuit. The 50% rule was if you have mixed loads where you've got some cord and plug stuff in that you can unplug, you can move it out of the way, it's portable. And on that same branch circuit, you've got fixed electric equipment that stays in place, such as a dishwasher or a under sink disposal. They cannot be total of the connected load on that branch circuit can't be more than 50%. So that was for the smaller circuits, 15 and 20 amp. Now these bigger ones, for fixed electric space heating, you're going to have very similar rules. They're just going to be certain equipment that is larger than the 15 and 20 amp. So fixed electric space heating is one of those. You can't have more than 30 amps on that. So that's all kind of part of this. But the code does allow you to take um, two of these fixed electric space heating units and put them on the same circuit, but it's got to be no more than 80%. So, um, so I think with a 30 amp circuit, you couldn't have, you could only supply 24 amps total.
Mm-hmm.
So if they come together, if they come to more than 24 amps, 24.1, that tells you right there you have to put it on its own circuit.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a 120 gallon capacity electric water heater, or less than 120, then this next rule is for that. They're often placed on their own circuits because the code requires the branch circuit to be sized 125% larger than uh, the the needs of that appliance, okay, of
Yep.
that hot water heater. So they're often on their own circuit. Um, Central vacuum outlet assembly. That's kind of a special one. Not most people probably don't have it, but in some locales, everyone's
Yeah.
got them. Okay, because it's very convenient. Instead of lugging around a great big heavy vacuum cleaner, you just have the hose and the wand, and you just plug that into your central vacuum outlet, and that could be on a general purpose outlet, but they require anything that's used that every branch circuit that's used that way has to uh, it can't be rated, or let's see, it's got to be rated at least 100% of the circuit's rating. So
Mm-hmm.
the total connected loads on that, I'm not saying this very well, but it can't be more than 100% of the circuit's rating.
Gotcha.
Okay. And also manufacturers tend to recommend, if they don't require you to put those on individual branch circuits or dedicated circuits. Room air conditioners are another one. They use the 50% rule because they're normally going to be um, fixed in place. You can have it on a general purpose branch circuit with other outlets or with other equipment, but it'll be limited at 50% of that branch circuit's rating.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually require more than 10 amps, or, they're usually kind of high. So in-wall units, I think sometimes they require a 20 amp circuit by themselves. Um, and again, I think most manufacturers tend to ask for dedicated circuits. Now, this last one that I have for you before we get into the list of commonly used ones
Mm-hmm.
are water pumps. And I don't know if we should even talk about this because it's probably very rare, but some of the older homes, the NEC requires your service to have no more than 6 switches to turn off your entire electrical system. And part of that rule is that those 6 switches need to be grouped together. There's an exception for a water pump that is intended to also be used for fire protection. So it's going to supply sprinklers or something to put fires out.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could just say it's intended for uh, to put out a fire in case we have one.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, they allow you to have that in a different area, but that could be one of your 6 switches. You have to have a placard at your service saying that there's also this other one, but that's an allowed thing, but it has to have its own individual branch circuit there for that
Wow.
water. Yeah, that's pretty convoluted. It's an exception within an exception that would require a dedicated circuit there.
You're allowed to forget that one if you're viewing this. You're allowed to. That part you can forget if you'd like. But so now that we got all the rules out of the way, we're never done with rules.
No.
We're going to get to our list here. This is going to be the slowest rapid fire list that I've ever done, I think. Because they're all going to be either yes or no, right? There's no like depends on any of them, right?
No, they're all depends. Yeah.
Kidding me.
Let me see if I had any that says yes for sure. No, I just left it completely off this list because
Oh.
we've either already talked about it or yeah. So it's
But we
just
can make the explanation pretty quick, right? Because most of them is going to have to do with our second video on how
mhm,
we size things. Some of
mhm.
them are going to have to do with what the manufacturer says. There's only a few reasons we really get into.
Yeah,
So we won't make it too complicated. So
right.
let's get right to it. I'm going to
Okay,
name them
so
off.
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Air conditioner for your room. So one room air conditioner. What do you say?
It often needs an individual branch circuit. And that's because that depends a lot on the rating. These come in all different sizes and
Hmm.
shapes and plug in or hardwire, fixed in place, whatever. If it's in an wall unit or whatever, that's a room air conditioner. Um, it could be more than 50% of the branch circuit, so it needs of a multiple branch circuit, so it would have to have its own individual, or
Okay.
the
So there,
manufacturer calls for it.
yeah, and that's pretty much going to be most of these, right? It's going to be the calculation on the label or the
Yeah,
manufacturer.
yeah.
So the air conditioner for your house,
Usually, yeah, and that's usually just done without even question,
that's
but
going to be almost always,
almost
right?
always,
And even if it's allowed, inspector's probably not going to allow it.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
probably not.
not around here. Getting too detailed. So heater for your bathroom, fixed heater for your bathroom.
Usually, usually because it's a fairly high, any kind of a heater, you're going to have a lot of wattage output. A hair dryer, I've seen that on lists. If it's a big enough hair dryer, it may have to have its own circuit.
Oh wow.
Uh, but for me, I would not even use one, obviously, or a curling iron. So I'm never gonna be tripping breakers in my bathroom. It'll be my teenage daughter that does eventually.
There you
Hair
go.
dryer, curling iron going. Um, those things add up pretty fast because anything with a heating element in it is going to take a lot of electricity.
That
It's
makes
a lot of,
sense.
yeah.
So we mentioned a little bit earlier central vacuum systems.
Usually,
What about coffee makers? Coffee pots.
if it's a high wattage one, you may need one. For us, I looked at ours. It doesn't really need one. It could even be on a 15, uh, you know, 15 amp circuit if with other things. But some people really get into their coffee making and they may need. So
Yeah,
yeah,
especially the
probably
ones
look. Go ahead.
especially the ones in the kitchen. It's really after it passes that the calculation based on the label and then the manufacturer specifications, especially in the kitchen, it's going to have to do with how you lay out your kitchen and how you want to use your kitchen, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be a huge factor. What about clothes dryer?
Okay. Here's another gray area. Most people would say yes, definitely, but the code allows you to have more than one dryer on a circuit. It's a lot like heating, like cooking equipment is the same way.
Hmm.
Um, some people will say you have to have it on a dedicated circuit, but there's a lot of exceptions in the code. Again, it's gonna be a matter of how much does this pull, um, and typically we put those on an individual branch circuit that's 30 amps, 240 volts,
Hmm.
with number 10 wire.
How about electric water heater?
Usually, it depends on the size. I think the manufacturers often require it. If it, and we talked about those rules there, specific for electric water heaters. If they're 120 gallons or less, they fall into that. And I think it was the same as the 125% rule.
Okay. What about freezers?
Your freezers are usually put on I would want, if I had like a deep freezer or something like that, you're going to have a lot of stuff in there that you don't want it to trip off for some unrelated reason that, you plugged in too many pieces of equipment to that same branch circuit. So it would be best probably to have your freezer on and your refrigerator as well for the same reason on their own dedicated lines.
Mm-hmm. And even some inspectors that we've worked with, um, rooms that require GFCI protection, they prefer to see that we've run an individual branch circuit to that freezer that does not have GFCI protection with a single outlet. So that may conflict with the code, but I've
But
worked
it,
with
yeah,
inspectors that want that, so that way you don't have, a ground fault tripping and now all of your quarter beef is gone.
yeah,
That's a big deal.
that would be tragic.
That would be. So how about a furnace or heat pump?
Um, okay, your furnace, usually it's customarily put on its own circuit. There are exceptions that we've talked about in the other videos. You could put the air conditioning on it. I'm not sure why you would do that. And also, they also allow you to plug some auxiliary equipment that's related to the furnace or to the heating equipment there. Um, so that could be done. Um,
Garbage disposal?
sometimes, sometimes it is. Um, but usually, unless the manufacturer requires separate circuits, it's normally, in most of the places I've been, it's put on with the same circuit as the dishwasher.
Yeah. Um, hot tub or spa?
Usually, not according to the code. The code doesn't say it. Come right out and say it like it does with a hydro massage bathtub. But hot tub or spa, I think, is usually done with its own branch circuit. Um,
Manufacturer requirement
manufacturers
usually.
will require it, and um, they would have to go with the 50% rule because they're fixed in place as well. So if they were on their individual circuits.
Okay, so we already talked about microwaves earlier. How about ovens and electric ranges?
They're often put on their own circuit. So um, that doesn't mean they have to be. There's a lot of exceptions in the code that allow you to put several on one circuit, but that's kind of specific and it's kind of technical. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different crazy rules about cooking equipment.
Refrigerator.
It's often done. I think we mentioned this already with the freezers. Sometimes the manufacturers require it or recommend it. Uh, and I think we talked about it. If it's in your kitchen and it's on a 15 amp circuit, then it has to be an individual branch circuit.
Mm-hmm. And that's crossing over with other code rules, right?
Hmm.
So how about a sauna with electric heat?
Um, let's see. These range in size from 3 to 30 kilowatts. That's a huge range.
Yeah.
So it's likely that they're going to be required. Maybe the manufacturer just spells it right out for you. It makes your life easy. Otherwise, you got to do a little bit of math if you want to put it on, maybe have a receptacle in there for other use. Maybe you want to bring your radio into your sauna. I don't know. Maybe you want to blow your hair in there, blow dry your hair in there while you're sweating
There you go.
for whatever reason. Uh, check for the 50% rule. Depending on the size of the branch circuit rating, but it's likely going to require its own.
Sump pumps.
That's typically put on its own individual branch circuit just because um, it's sort of similar to the refrigerator rule where you don't want something else overloading the circuit and tripping it off, and then you end
Hmm.
up having a flood. So you're thinking about property damage and stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
So a lot of the good solution, which we've talked about in other video on those, is audible alarm receptacles.
yeah, that goes. Usually these sump pumps are in a basement, in an area where it's supposed to be GFCI protected,
Hmm.
and um, oftentimes the temptation is to not make that GFCI protected, but it really, according to the code, it spells it right out. It has to be GFCI protected. And a sump pump is it's just a good idea. It's just one more thing to protect you from property damage. The
Yep.
GFCI will help protect your life, but the individual branch circuit will help to keep it from tripping.
Hmm. Toaster.
That depends on the size. And let's see, if you have a large toaster, you may need its own circuit. You just need to do the calculation.
Your clothes washer.
That's not usually, at least where we're from, that's not usually on its own branch circuit. It can share the other outlets in that laundry area. It's
Hmm.
okay to put those on together. For whatever reason, you might want to plug. Oh, let's say you're going to do some ironing there while you're doing. Uh, that is allowed. Then you'd have to look at the requirements of the different items and make sure that they're compatible with each other. So, but
Then how about a water pump?
um, that depends. The NEC doesn't require an individual circuit unless it uses that exception that we talked about for the
Fire suppression.
fire, yeah, fire protection.
So if you want to look specifically, we have this table on our. It's going to be in the article on our website by the time this is posted. But let me hit you with a couple of curveballs.
Yeah.
Tanning bed.
Uh, Again, same thing. Size of look at the nameplate rating. Um, what voltage is it? Is it, if it's 15 or 20 amp circuit that it needs, then it'll have to go with the 80% rule. It'll have to, if it's fixed in place, again, it's got to go with the 50% rule. So it depends. These are easy curveballs.
What if I'm an indoor gardener and I'm growing a lot of sprouts in my room and I have lights to help them grow?
Ooh,
That's kind of
now
a weird situation.
that's a good curveball because I don't want to I don't want to say it depends because there may be something in the code specific to grow lights,
Hmm.
but I don't think so. I think that you still go back to um, the the main rules, 80%, 50%. Um, how much do those lights pull? And you'd have to go around and count them all up. I guess it would be one specific light is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's one specific appliance that would need a dedicated circuit.
Well, you'd have to ask that question, right?
Hmm.
That'd be
Yeah.
necessary. Okay, so what about this? I'm a welder, and on the weekends I weld stuff in my shop. So I have multiple welders. Do I need one circuit for each one?
Now, welding has its own code article.
Hmm.
Welders do,
So
and
that one's going to be a not
I didn't
usually, right?
I didn't include it in this article, so I'd have to go there and to answer that question,
But
actually.
more or less the answer is depends on, are the welders the similar voltage, and if you're one person, you're not going to use two welders at once, right?
Probably not.
To
Now,
give a code friendly answer, you'd have to do more
yeah,
research.
yeah. Typically, I'll give you this answer. So it typically is put on its own individual branch circuit. But like you said, they might split that off. They might have two different welders, and they understand that they can't plug them both in at the same time. They might have two different types of receptacles that they use. Right. So.
Okay, so in that same shop where I'm doing my welding, I want to put in this massive fan to suck the air out. Like, it's bigger than any fan than I've seen in somebody else's garage. So does that need a dedicated circuit, or can I just put that on with the lights?
It will probably need its own dedicated circuit, I would guess. I wouldn't want to put it on with the lights if it
What
was that
about,
big.
okay, what about this? I want to put floor heat. You know, I'm redoing my kitchen floor and my bathroom floor. And you know, it's just so freezing in the winter. So we want to put floor heat underneath there.
I think that would still go with fixed electric space heating, I believe. If you know,
Okay.
if your boiler or whatever, even if you're, yeah. So I'm thinking of circulating water through it, but you're just talking about electrical heating elements. Yeah. So it would go with the fixed electric space heating rule. It would depend on the amount that it's pulling. So it would need to um, be no more than 30 amps and at least 125% of the rated load.
Okay, so I got a back patio.
The branch circuit.
I have a lot of weird projects at this house. So on the back patio, I'm putting in a motorized awning. Does that need its own circuit?
How come you didn't ask me any of these questions before?
Because I'm actually proving a point here. I planned this, right? Or at least I'm pretending like I planned it.
Okay.
For the homeowner's purposes, if there's something unusual, you more or less need to ask the electrician if it needs a circuit, right? Because this is what we tell our guys, right? You're not going to know everything. Even David, who is the master electrician, in my opinion, we still have to refer back to the code book.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't be prepared for everything on the spot. And so that's my point with this is you can go on our chart and there's no yeses and there's no nos. And that's for a reason, because of the safety. There's specific things we have to look at for the safety. And then for the convenience, there's things that the code book isn't going to help us with, that having an electrician in your house with the code book in his back pocket or in his van can give you specific advice on your unique situation. And so anytime you have something unusual, there's more than likely going to be a more nuanced answer to finding the better solution.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, because you brought up welders, you brought up this single motor operated load with your awning, and those are specifically addressed in the code book. And I didn't think about them, but yeah. So I would have to go back and look that up in the code book, and be able to answer you later on some of those things, just to be sure that I'm not giving you some bad information.
Absolutely. But the common ones are in this table in our article. And if you forget all this stuff, right, just go back to our article and read through there where David explains the whole situation. If in doubt, call an electrician. And if he's in doubt, he can call up his code book, right?
That's right.
And so I think this has been a great one. I feel like we're getting a little bit better with every video.
Good.
That's the plan anyways.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, do you have any final words on this? Anything that we skipped before we sign out?
Yeah, not unless you wanted to go back and summarize everything. And I don't think that would be necessary. They can go back and look at the videos. There is a summary at the end of the article.
Yep. Definitely check out the article. If you haven't already, like our subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page and all that stuff. But we're going to brainstorm our next topic for you guys, and we'll make sure we have a good one. So keep an eye out for our next video. Thanks again, David.
Thank you, Stephen.